Okay, I see it's 4:30, so I will call the meeting to order. And first, I'd like to acknowledge that the District of Tofino operates within the territory of the Tla-o-qui-aht First Nation. I have a notice to attendees that the meeting is being video recorded and will be published on the District of Tofino's YouTube channel. And notice to all virtual attendees to sign up for public comment and question period using the Q&A function in Zoom. To register, participants are required to enter their full name, residential address, and the agenda item they wish to speak to. And I'll move the approval of the meeting location from the chair that pursuant to section 15 of the District of Tofino meeting procedure bylaw number 1229, 2016 as amended, the June 3rd, 2024 regular meeting. Oh, pardon me, that's a committee of the whole meeting. Yeah. Committee of the whole meeting be held electronically via Zoom and live broadcasted on the District of Tofino's YouTube channel, and that the facility provided for the public to watch and hear the meeting be located at the Municipal Hall, 380 Campbell Street in Tofino, BC. And if there's no objection to that, I will move all that carried by unanimous consent. And I'll look for unanimous consent as well for the adoption of the agenda, and I'll note that the June 3rd, 2024 Committee of the Whole agenda be adopted. Seeing no objection, it is adopted. And I will also move from the chair and look for unanimous consent for the adoption of the minutes of the May 3rd, 2024 Committee of the Whole. And so I'll move that the minutes of the Special Committee of the Whole meeting held May 23rd, 2024 be adopted. And seeing no objection, those minutes are adopted. And next item would be the public comment on agenda items. And I'll ask Mr. Shortall if there are anybody signed up either in the gallery or on Zoom.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. We currently have nobody signed up, but I will make a call to about any individuals online or in the council chambers. If you wish to make comments to council, you can do so now by stating your name, your address, and the agenda item you're speaking to. Calling once, calling twice, calling 3 times, and no comments at this point, Chair Anderson.
Okay, we'll move into, we have no delegations, so we'll move to correspondence, and we have an item of correspondence from C. Lowther regarding trees and green spaces. And I believe Mayor Law has an update and wish to speak to this.
Sure. Yeah, just a comment from me. I know it was kind of a bit of a shock to many people to see the trees and rhodos come down near the Dolphin Motel in the Muff. And we did receive a lot of emails, and this particular email was great to receive. So I just thought I would just speak to some of the background that staff and council in the past had worked on with that particular spot. So in 2009, the muck was diverted around the trees in order to try to save them and minimize impacts to those trees when the muck was run through there. And that caused over the years lots of problems. Of course, we know the roots were there. We know it was very narrow. There had been lots of accidents there and lots of complaints. And there was attempts, I know the staff attempted to try to find creative ways to get around those trees, around the rhodos. And in the end, after discussing with the engineers multiple times, they decided that they had to take those down for safety and efficiency, and to get the to get away from either the Dolphins right away, Dolphin Motels right away, or the highway. So in the end, that was a very difficult decision to come to, and of course, also they're aware that you know, we've been trying very hard not to cut trees in nesting season, and so staff, with the limited window that staff had, they did move forward with that, but they did hire Redfish, and Redfish did a comprehensive review of those trees to make sure that there was no nests there before they were taken down. And the rhodos, of course, were dug up and moved, and some of them have actually been already replanted, and I believe they're going to be put in parks and other places. And I think some of those rhodos were actually moved there from somewhere else as well. So I think the bottom line, I just wanted to reiterate, and I was able to go on the radio and speak with many people, is that this decision at this particular place was not done arbitrarily. It was done over a long period of time with engineers, consultants, environmental consultants, Redfish, and unfortunately, at times, sometimes we have to cut down trees that are valuable to the community, and I think this is one of those times. And you know, the background is that the district, we as a council have made it clear that the environment is a priority, and working to save trees is a priority, and we've made great strides both in the OCP and upcoming changes that we hope to implement also. And also in real time, I know that staff have worked hard to save trees that were originally put on the chopping block, to be literal, such as the trees by the tennis courts. Both sides of the tennis courts, a significant number of trees were able to be saved there with work of a great arborist that the district has found. And you know, other areas too that the district's able to prioritize and save trees where we can. And I think that's important to recognize that some trees have a value apart from that they're just trees, that the town recognizes a relationship, and I think both council and staff really do understand that relational value is important, and that we all do recognize that, and it's not to be diminished. It's just unfortunately at times trees have to come down, and so I just wanted to reiterate that. You know, there is significant progress working towards contiguous forests. We've made lots of strides to protect foreshore, wildlife habitat, wildlife corridors, etc. And we can always do better. And I think coming out of this, I think it's going to be important to find creative ways to work after we have to cut down trees. And so it could be something like replanting trees somewhere else, or you know, I know we have a parks strategy master plan coming up, and I think that a significant part of that is going to be how do we protect significant portions of our forests and important ecosystems. So I think that's going to be one way too. And I know, you know, just to go back, I know the district, the school District 70 took a lot of heat for taking some trees down in front of the daycare. So this follows really closely on that. And I think it seems like there is a lot of work in Tofino. There's a lot of stuff going on, more so than any other time, I think, probably in the past 10 years. And that destabilizes you know, all these places that we love. And so I know that the school district is working on a policy to a tree retention policy or tree protection policy, and that may include something like, you know, having to replace trees or choosing to replace trees if some do come down. So I think everybody's on the same page pretty much. We're trying our best, staff's trying their best. We do care about our environment, and again, sometimes hard decisions have to be made, and this is one of them. But I think staff really did try to mitigate all the factors as best they could. And I look forward to discussions with council in the future, council and staff, other ways that we can recognize the value of these special places, special trees, and find other ways that we can perhaps make recompense when difficult decisions have to be made. So that's my comment. So open it up for council. Actually, I'm not the chair.
Councillors.
Yeah, I just thought this was a well-written letter, and I was wondering if it would be appropriate to address some of these issues in the upcoming tree protection bylaw when we go through that. I think that would be a question to staff.
Okay, I'm wondering if staff is prepared any answers today. I know that that the other also was mentioned, the dark sky policies, and those we were just looking in a recent council meeting at some of our strategic priorities, and those both the tree protection bylaw and the dark sky policies remain on that list. Council has not given that maybe as high priority as the letter writer would like or is suggested, but it is council's bailiwick to set those priorities. So as a council, perhaps that could be revisited next time. Councillor Sawyer, did you? I thought you had your hand.
I did have my hand up. I'd be curious if moving forward there could be a framework where, along with partnering with organizations like Redfish, we can also involve some of our local groups in the conversations when we're looking at, sourcing creative ideas to deal with some of the construction that's going to be upcoming or any projects like that. Is that a strategy that we could go with? Is there any precedent for that?
I think that's the kind of thing that we would talk about in our strategic plan, and also in any policy review that we're having. There might be places in the zoning bylaw update that we're doing that some of those policies might come into play. Certainly in our OCP and our VTOA documents, there are things that should be emphasized and strengthened as we move through planning processes on any number of things that might come forward. Specifically putting in policies to work with Redfish or something like that might not be, I personally, this is my personal opinion, might not be the best approach, because there may be other agencies that you want to engage at different times on different things, but having the right policies in place to have the right environmental reviews and maybe to have policies that actually speak to the nesting season and things like that, then you could engage the right people at the right time for it. I don't know what's in place or how to go about that, so I'd have to ask staff, I guess, and I don't know if they're prepared to answer that right now, but it's the kind of thing that you would look for a report from staff back on at some point. So maybe that might be the action that we take to refer it to staff.
All right, as a follow-up.
I'm just, you want to follow up on that then?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Then I'd like to get the ball rolling that when we are going into the tree protection bylaw in zoning, would it be possible to strike a mayor's committee and have members of the public from interested groups be able to give input in a one-time session that we could then take with us going forward into the policy?
It's possible, I guess, with the support of council. Ms. Satchanian?
Thank you, through the chair. I'm unsure exactly how the tree protection bylaw would be addressed through the zoning process. It is indicated as a separate project and has been deferred in light of the zoning review, which is expected to take about 12 months. If this does come up through the zoning process, there's going to be extensive consultation as part of that process, and there would likely be an opportunity to inform through that process rather than doing one specific for this at this time. So I would like to have the zoning review process play out, see what aspects of related to trees will be a part of that process. But as once we do get to the tree protection bylaw, which like I said, won't be for at least another 12 months, we can incorporate consultation into that process. Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Steer, did you have your hand up?
No, I'm good, thank you.
I mean, another, just for, in the past, also a notice of motion would be a good way to bring a new process forward or something like that. Then you have a chance to background it with staff or with other members of council and sort of, if you want to start a committee or something like that, I think a notice of motion process would be a little more appropriate, just simply because it prepares council and staff more to be able to answer questions, to work towards supporting that better, knowing what it is more. So that's my thought. Yeah. Okay, are you satisfied with that for now?
Thank you.
Okay. Any other councillors or any other comments on the letter? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on the agenda then. And we have presentations and reports. Point 1 is the utility rate review, and we have a verbal from our Chief Administrative Officer, Ms. Antania.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm here in my capacity as the district's Deputy Financial Officer, awaiting our new financial officer who's going to start on July 8th. So this will likely be one of the last times you see me present on a financial matter for a while. Tonight I will be presenting a proposed structure for utility rates for the sewer utility and the water utility. I'll just take a moment to bring up the presentation and I'll go through an overview of tonight's presentation. Yeah, okay, thank you. Nope. Okay, good, thank you. Okay, so I'll provide a background and go over the objectives, which I have gone over in a previous presentation, but it will set the stage for the new rate structure that I am proposing this evening. I'll go over the proposed rate structure. I opted against providing scenarios. It was a fairly intensive rate review that took place over the last 8 months in consultation with the infrastructure team, as well as our consultants, Waterworth, previously known as Econics, who we've been working with since 2011. So I'm proposing one rate scenario this evening, and I'll go through the objectives to start with, the rate structure itself in comparison to the previous or the current rate structure. I'll provide some consumption data and a rationale, as well as some sample calculations and a recommendation and next steps after today. So just to provide some background, staff came forward on November 20th with a report from the Director of Infrastructure and Public Works. At that meeting, staff were authorized to prepare amendments to the following bylaws for Council's consideration. The ones in bold, and I won't read them all out loud, have been brought to Council and amended since that time. Subdivision Development Control Bylaw is expected to begin review in 2025. And the water and the sewer utility rate bylaw are the two that we are contemplating this evening. In addition to that, staff were also authorized to prepare amendments to the Emergency Water Plan and Water Conservation Program, which have since been approved by Council with a new water conservation bylaw in place. The utility bill adjustment policy will be reviewed in 2025. Staff are considering an incentive program related to conservation, and that will be looked at in 2025. We got through a great deal of work since that November 20th report to Council, but we weren't able to get to all the items on the list in 2024. On January 15th, I came to Council and presented the purpose of this rate review, which I mentioned was fairly intensive. Some background and external factors and risks were presented by the Infrastructure and Public Works team. And that's when the objectives were presented for an overall rate review, as well as project-specific objectives. We presented at that time that the current rate structure does have inherent rate equity, and we were able to maintain that through this rate review, and what I'm proposing today maintains that equity. So I will go through these objectives briefly. I won't read off the screen, but there's a number of objectives that we work through and that have been established with our consultants, Waterworth, and that we ensure that we balance throughout our contemplations when we're trying to establish a new rate structure. Revenue sufficiency and revenue stability are the two that we look at quite significantly. We need to ensure that we have the right amount of revenue to meet our expenditure requirements as adopted in Council's financial plan. Revenue stability was looked at quite closely this time. We've made some changes or proposing some changes to the fixed fee component of our rate structure. Resource conservation was a main driver behind this rate review. By stabilizing that fixed fee component, we're able to minimize some of the risk that will be inherent in this structure as we work on a rate structure that would work on and meet the objective of resource conservation. We need to ensure that this rate structure is easy to understand, not only for the community, but for staff as well, to ensure that we can administer it effectively. Equity and fairness is a big component, particularly when you're calculating utility rates. If you change something in one utility class, it inevitably impacts the other rate class. If you change something within a class that can be particularly volatile, like our commercial class, which has quite a range of consumption levels, you can compromise that equity component of the rate structure. And I'll go over what I mean by that a little bit more when I start talking about the numbers. And of course, public acceptability. It's important for us to talk about developing rate structure and provide a strong rationale and a set of objectives like I am presenting this evening, to ensure that the customers that are paying for the utilities have accepted the structure that is being proposed. And political acceptability, this is Council's opportunity today again to have a look at the rate structure and provide some comments to staff, and we can go back and reconsider some aspects of the rate structure, keeping in mind that we have another set of objectives that we need to maintain as we consider Council's comments through that rate review. Ease of implementation is important when we are proposing a rate structure that is particularly complex. It can be difficult to implement on the administrative side, as well as communicating that and implementing it in reality for our customers. And then we always look to rate model standards through our consultants with Waterworth to make sure that they are weighing in on what some of the best practices are across the province, the country, and other countries as well, so that we can be innovative in our approach to developing our new rate structures. So our project-specific objectives were to assess the overall rate class structure. We decided to maintain the same rate classes in this rate structure that we will be proposing today, with a commercial class, commercial and other class, a residential class, as well as a fire flow charge. We reviewed the fixed and variable charges extensively, and we've determined the applicability of seasonal rates, which are currently applicable to the commercial class, and we have removed those for this proposal. Service connection fees were reviewed extensively to ensure that the connection fee was applicable to the type of service and the cost of service that was being connected. And we had a look at the proportion of the sewer rate to the water rate. We are commissioning the wastewater treatment plant in September of this year, as we all know. And the proportion of 90% of the water rate for the sewer rate is no longer going to be possible, as the sewer system is going to be more costly than the water system. We've reviewed all the additional charges in the water and the sewer utilities. Some will remain unchanged. And we've used our 2023 consumption data to establish utility rates. We understand that was a conservative year, and when you're establishing fees and charges and projecting revenue, and particularly when you're adding a resource conservation objective to the rate review, we have to make sure that we're using conservative numbers and data when calculating rates and making projections. So the revenue requirements for 2024 were adopted in Council's 2024 to 2027 financial plan. The water revenue that was established from water fees was 953,500. That's a 4% increase, plus some changes related to structure changes. And what we realized and know definitely needs to change to this rate review is a change to our service connection fees, which I'll go through in detail in a moment. We've, because of that impact and likely a reduction on the collection of service connection fees, we've had to add some fixed and variable components to collecting the difference in that revenue. And I'll go over what those dollar amounts are in a moment. Similar in the sewer charge, with the connection fees decreasing slightly, the revenue targets there through fees and charges are 1,243,445. So this is all in consideration of the wastewater treatment plant commissioning on September 1st of this year. Maybe not exactly September 1st, but in September this year. Sewer charges continue to be tethered to water consumption charges. We all know the sewer system is not metered, and this is the most effective way and used in practice in many other municipalities as a way to charge effectively the sewer rate. Sewer charges are, as I say, based on commissioning in September of this year. So in reflecting on some of the objectives that I noted earlier on in the presentation, I just wanted to go over an overview of the rate structure and attach some of those objectives to it. Water rates and sewer rate structures were reviewed, and the rate classes, as I said, remained unchanged. And that helped us maintain the equity and fairness objective, public acceptability, understandability, and ease of implementation objectives. This is a rate structure that the customers are used to, that council is used to seeing, and so as well as staff. And we're able to maintain that and while not compromising many of the objectives. The fixed charge revenue has increased, so there'll be a less reliance on variable charges. It hasn't changed significantly, but enough to ensure that we've maintained that revenue stability objective. The proposed rate structure allocates charges to where pressures are on the system. So where there's increased demand on the system, that's going to mean increased cost in this rate structure. Coming out of 2023, where there is particular pressures on the system, when supply was low and demand was high, it became very apparent to staff that we needed to propose a rate structure that would respond to that. So the structure continues to balance overall class consumption with overall charges, and I'll show a diagram of what that looks like later on in the presentation. So we've ensured that we've been able to meet that equity and fairness objective, public acceptability and understandability, given that we were able to maintain that overall class balance, which we currently have in this rate structure, and we'll maintain it in the newly proposed structure. We've eliminated seasonal charges. The variable charges will change with consumption levels rather than have a seasonal component. So we've implemented tiers in the commercial and other class where seasonality is currently in place to ensure that we're capturing the high consumption levels in quarters where supply is particularly constrained. So as I mentioned a couple of times, the wastewater treatment plant is commissioning this year. The operating expenses have been presented anticipating the commissioning of the wastewater treatment plant since the 2017 to 2021 financial plan. So originally we estimated a 97% increase to operating expenses. Further design of that plant dropped the operating expenses increase to 87%, which was in the 2022 financial plan. The 2024 to 2028 financial plan includes an 87% increase to operating expenses in the sewer fund beginning in September 2024, with a full year's increase in 2025 of this year. So the mathematics around this were not easy, which is why it has taken about 8 months to develop. Creating a rate structure that we could leave in place going into the 2025 year was essential because it takes a great deal of time to establish and review the rates. So when we get later on in the presentation and I start putting numbers to what the overall revenue collection will be for 2024 and for 2025, we've been able to achieve that and not have to come back to council for a rate change in 2025. And here it is. So this is the projected and target revenues for water. So in the blue column, those are our 2023 revenues, and that's what we used. That's the data we used to review this rate structure, to compare it to whether we were collecting effectively fixed and variable charges where we needed to. The next column is the 2024 projections. So based on the rate structure that I will be presenting today, we target to collect just over $1 million. And if you go to the other green bar, the 1 million, if we go to the orange amount, and the language is covered there, is that those are the 2024 budget amounts. So you can see that we are over collecting essentially in 2024. The budget was $953,500. We project to collect $1,002,561. It's about a $50,000 extra. You'll notice, probably recall earlier in the presentation, I talked about an incentive program that staff would like to have in place for 2025 to promote and encourage conservation. Those conservation efforts are not funded currently because we have to be conservative when projecting revenues, and this is a significant change to our rate structure. Any overage in collection and revenues will go into a reserve that we can use for incentive programs in the following year. I would like to remind council that when we were approving the financial plan, we were using funds, and this rate structure relies on previous year's surpluses, which we refer to as working capital, to be able to balance the financial plan. So too heavy of a reliance on that working capital amount from year to year, which is estimated at about 200,000 per year bringing forward. Too high of a reliance on that can compromise the rate structure and our ability to maintain our revenue stability. So we were not able to get it to the penny, but having any extra means we rely less on that working capital influx into the budget, which is essentially prior year surplus. And we're also able to collect and set aside in reserves some funds for conservation programs. So the last two columns are 2025, and that's for the full year. And so our target in 2025 is 991,640, and we are projecting to collect $1 million and 84,000. There is a heavier reliance in the 2025 budget on working capital beyond 200,000, and that's going to help us relieve the pressure on the working capital reliance. So when we bring the budget forward for 2025, we will have a close look at this. We'll also have numbers coming out of the 2024 year, consumption numbers, and if there's any changes that need to be made, we can certainly do that in 2025. It's just not going to happen on January 1st. And so the important point to that is we want to make some changes to, if we need to make some changes to the rate structure, that 2020 or the Q1 consumption is fairly low, and we wouldn't be sort of behind if we needed to inform the rate structure and make any proposed changes in 2025. So similar to sewer, we are slightly under collecting in 2024. Our target was 1.243, and we, with this rate structure, would be collecting 1.233. Because we have working capital dollars to put into the budget, I'm comfortable with that. We're not going to get this to the penny because we're dealing with some large dollar amounts in many utility accounts, and also very conservative data, which really reduces some of that risk in the rate structure. If we look to the following year, we're almost where we need to target at a budget of 1.659 million, and we would be collecting 1.6 million with this rate structure. So again, this is going to be a dynamic process, reviewing the utility rates from year to year. Once we have more clear data on the operational expenses of the wastewater treatment plant, we'll be able to make some tweaks to the rates as we move forward. But with the information we have today and the great deal of work it takes to calculate these utility rates, this is the closest we could come budget versus actual. We can come back to some of these tables, but I'd really like to get through the full presentation as I may answer some of the questions council may have as I move through with more information. So the service connection fees is where we started with the rate review. The service connection fees, we basically referred out to the infrastructure and public works department, and we wanted to establish fees that would be more suitable for the cost of materials and supplies, as well as the cost of the service that was being installed. We are clearing up some language that was in our bylaws. We are charging based on meter size, and we'll continue to do that. But the current fees are on the top, so you can see that the smallest meter, the connection fee on the water side was 2,000, and it's equivalent on the sewer side, which I'll bring up in a moment here. And as the meter sizes get larger, the fee would nominally increase. We've had the infrastructure team review what is actually installed on the ground and what's required on the ground, staff time, materials and supplies, as well as the cost to administer installing these services at the various properties. And we've established a new rate structure. So we're beginning at a cost of $1,000 for the smallest meter, going up to a 6-inch meter, which would be at 8,000. Anything greater than that would be at actual cost, and that's typically done through a works and services agreement. So the current rate structure, we are at 2,500 for a 2-inch meter. Our current rate structure is at 1.5 inches at $2,500. So there's been quite a bit of change there. And if I were to translate that into numbers, we are estimating that we will collect about $8,800 less in service connection fees in 2023 or 2024, sorry, based on this change. And that value has been moved into the water charges based on fixed and variable charges. So I've incorporated that revenue amount, or that revenue amount was incorporated in that water charges number I gave earlier on, as well as in council's financial plan that was adopted. And I'm going to move on to sewer fees, but similarly, we had to remove some of the revenue we projected to collect through sewer connection fees. That was about $12,000, and we moved that into the fixed and variable charges as well. So the table up above looks similar to water charges, and down below you can't fully see that, but the sewer connection fees look quite a bit different. We're charging based on connection type, which is a forced service or a gravity service, and the cost is different based on the sizes. And again, this is based on material supplies, staff time, as well as administration to install these services to the property.
Yeah, question.
Just through the chair, just a quick note. I just noted that you know, in some of the smaller connections, I assume their residential connections are actually going down substantially for both the water connections and the sewer. I just thought that was interesting to note.
Yes. Yeah, typically the residents can, I mean, depending on the fixtures on site, that's more for maybe water connection fees. They can be up to a 1-inch meter, maybe even bigger if needed, but yes, typically it's around the 5/8 to 3/4 inch.
Since we had a little break there, and it might be a question for staff, I'm just curious in terms of the servicing on those meter sizes, some of the 6-inch and above. On an average, maybe over the last 5-year average, what is the number of connections that we're looking at in an average year, water service connections?
I have that answer, I think. Yeah, it's usually about 12 per year, 10 to 12 per year on average.
On average, and within that breakdown, the vast majority would be those smaller meter sizes as opposed to some of the larger developments around those 6-inch plus meter size.
Oh, 6-inch plus, sorry, I'm talking about total.
Yeah, no, I'm talking total as well, yeah.
Okay, not just 6-inch.
No, I was just curious because obviously those bigger meter sizes would be those larger development types that we, so I was just curious of the overall, but that gives me an idea of what we're talking in terms of sheer numbers.
Good one.
You have one too?
Yeah, sure. No, I know. When we're looking at force service and gravity service, would that be like the sewer pump on somebody's property? What is that?
So if it's connecting through the chair.
Yeah.
If it's a force service, it would be a customer's pumping up with a force service into the gravity line. Or if it was a gravity service, it'd just be a gravity connection into our system. And then to the District of Tofino has 2 types of connections. So sometimes you'll have people that need to pump into a force system on the district side as well in some locations throughout the district. But that would always be a force connection to a force connection. You never go gravity into a force connection. That helps answer through the chair.
Thank you.
I'll keep going, thank you, great support there. So connection fees and other charges, we have service turn on and off fees. They were reviewed and they're gonna remain the same, unchanged. There's a nominal fee for turn on of any utility counts, and if we have to go out on site and turn off, then there's a nominal fee as well. Meter testing fees have been, we're proposing to remove them from this bylaw. They will show up in the district's fees and charges bylaw. That'll come forward at a later date. Okay, so moving on to consumption charges, where we'll spend most of our time. The fixed charges will be tied to service size. So we've made a fairly significant change to fixed fees and had the infrastructure team look at this in a very similar way. We previously or currently have a somewhat arbitrary fixed fee to meet that objective of revenue stability in our rate structure. And we took this opportunity to have a much closer look at that fixed fee component to see if we could raise the percentage. And we've looked at it entirely different in terms of where we typically see the largest demand on a property. You're going to see a larger meter size, and to ensure that that service is maintained to that level and that demand, then that fixed fee is going to be higher. So it's a fixed fee. It's a fixed fee charge based on demand, essentially, and I'll go into the numbers in a moment. Because typically service size does indicate the level of demand. More revenue will be collected now through fixed fees, reducing that reliance on the variable charge. So the risk has gone down in our overall rate structure. We have worked extensively with Waterworth to establish fixed fees, beginning with the existing charge as our base rate. So we started with the fixed charge in the residential as well as the commercial classes, and we've built the fixed fee up from there based on service size or meter size. So the largest impact is in the commercial and other classes you will see, and the fire flow classes. Fire flow class is a fixed fee, and those have changed consistent with what we've established for fixed fee in meter sizes and in the commercial and other class. The largest impact is in the commercial class because that's where the majority of our consumption is. The residential class, well, there are 707 utility accounts. The overall consumption is less than what's consumed by the commercial and other class. There's quite a bit, there are far fewer accounts in the commercial and other class. That just means that the consumption is quite volatile in that class. And when we're playing with the rate structure, we have to be very careful because we can really compromise that equity within with the amount consumed and the amount billed quite quickly if we change that rate in the commercial class too much. So I will go over that a little bit more without going through my entire mathematical journey here this evening. So variable charges, currently sewer charges are 90% of water charges. That's fixed and variable. The proposed sewer charges will be 1.4 times the water charges, both fixed and variable. And seasonal rates have been removed from the rate structure. And consumption rates will increase to capture high consumption levels during times of limited supply and high demand in the commercial class. We went this route as well in both classes. In the proposed rate structure, in the residential class, last time we went through a rate review, we did have a higher tiered rate at higher consumption levels to make sure that properties that did have a commercial component on the property as short-term rentals were being charged at a higher consumption rate when it exceeded that residential average. I've taken a closer look at that this time, and I have made some changes to the rate structure, and I'll go into the numbers in a moment. In the commercial class, we've had a close look at that as well, and we chose a tiered system versus a seasonal system, and chose a consumption level that would target the properties that consumed at a time of the year where supply is particularly strained. So now I will go over the current and the proposed rate structure, and after that I will provide some calculations, sample calculations of the rates. So on the left-hand side of the slide in bold is what we're looking at. That's our current rate structure, but we're just gonna isolate residential for a moment. So the residential fixed fee is currently $44.49 in the residential class, and we are currently looking at the water utility only. We'll go on to sewer in a moment. So we began with that fixed fee charge of $44.49 for the 5/8 inch meter, as well as the 3/4 inch meter, because that is where the majority of our utility accounts sit, and typically where they are in the residential class for a single family home, perhaps with a suite, not necessarily a single family home with a cabin, because those properties may have a higher fixture count and may require a larger service size. So on the right-hand side, I've provided the new fixed fee or proposed fixed fee for all the sizes of meters. And in the last column of that table, I've provided the number of accounts in the residential class currently. So you can see that 540 accounts have that 5/8 inch meter, so they won't see a change there. 128 accounts won't see a change for the 3/4 inch meter. 38 accounts for a 1 inch meter will go up to $74.30. And then we have one property that is a 1.5 inch meter, is a very large parcel and not developed. But when it does develop, it will require that size of meter, because there'll likely be a larger development it allows for a larger development on that property. So that fixed fee will be $148.15. So when a property may demand that service at any point in time, we have to ensure that the infrastructure going to that property line is adequate enough. And it also means that there are typically higher operational and maintenance costs associated with servicing that infrastructure and the water meter to that property line. So that is the rationale for setting and changing and impacting those fixed fee rates based on the size that's established to the property line.
Just pause for a question. Councilor,
Question through the chair, and these are monthly fees?
Quarterly.
Property?
Quarterly.
Quarterly, okay, thank you. That's it,
Thank you. I should have noted that.
sorry.
These are quarterly fees. Thanks.
I think we've just talked about so much we all think we know, but I still forget.
Okay, so I will move on. So these are the new fixed fees for commercial and fire flow. So they are the same fee. So in bold on the left-hand side, that's our current fee structure with a $50.85 charge. And then the fire flow charges quarterly again for the 3-inch, 4-inch, and 6-inch service. And then on the right-hand side, I've provided the number of accounts at each service size and showing the new fixed fee quarterly for those accounts. So where we have a property with a 6-inch service, there's typically high demand and more costly infrastructure, more costly meter size to go in, repair and maintain. Those fixed fees are reflective of the demand and the supply that's required to those properties. And you can see there's a full range in the commercial class compared to the residential class, where you see the highest concentration at the lower service size. In this case, you can see that the majority of accounts go up to 2 inches, but there are some that go from 3 to 6 inches as well. So before I go into looking at the tiered structure for the variable charges, I just want to go over some of the rationale and the information I used in looking at these rates. The ranges in the residential class were the new ranges that I'm going to provide for the variable fee structure were developed in consideration of short-term rental use on a property, of which we have approximately 299 licenses. We didn't look at that in isolation. We looked at that in our current rate structure as well, to ensure that the amount of water being consumed by the residential class was being paid for by the residential class. So we've made some changes to the tiered rates, but we're able to maintain that equity, which I'll show in a visual later on in the presentation. The average residential consumption per quarter based on 2023 data, which is used to develop and analyze the rate structure, is 44 cubic meters. The average residential consumption in Q3, which I'm going to use to calculate rates, because it is the quarter that we consume the most amount of water. It's also the quarter where we see the most amount of constraint in the water system, the driest conditions. That's why I provided 50 cubic meters, and we'll go back to that number a little bit later on when we're calculating. 37%, which is 261 of the residential accounts, there are 707. Residential customers are using less than the 30 cubic meters that comes with that fixed fee. So we've maintained that 30 cubic meters will come with that fixed fee in the residential class. We played around with it, we removed it, we added it back in, we reduced it, and we weren't able to achieve equity and have a variable component in the residential class. If we remove that fixed fee that would come with that, it created a great deal of inequity in the residential class. So we had a look at how many accounts were using that amount of water, and 261 accounts out of 707 doesn't come close to the number of properties that may have that do have short-term rental use on them. So we felt like it was a safe place to keep the cubic meter consumption that came with that fixed fee in the residential class. I talk a lot about the residential class because I have a lot of history establishing utility rates here back to 2010, when we did an overhaul of the utility rates in 2011, where there was a feeling and sense in the community that the residential class was subsidizing the other rates, or the other classes when it came to utility rates. And having a look at it, they most definitely did, and we fixed that. And now the main focus when we have a look at utility rates is to ensure that equity is maintained in the residential class, where we have the most amount of accounts, but we don't have the most amount of consumption. So I just wanted to reflect on that for a moment, because we haven't all been here reviewing rates as long as I have. So the top 299 users of the residential class are using on average in Q2 81 cubic meters and 75 cubic meters in Q3. So when I have a look at utility rates, I always go on the more conservative side of things, and I've honed in on that number of 75 when I had a look at establishing rate structures. And of course, I'm oversimplifying this because I'm here to provide you with a summary of what I went through in developing utility rates. And so if you have any questions about the establishment of the tiers, I can certainly answer those for you. But I'd like to show you what we are proposing today. So on the left-hand side is what we currently have for the rate structure. That 0 to 30 cubic meters is included with the fixed fee. And as I mentioned, the fixed fee has changed. So that fixed fee, that first 30 cubic meters is a different cost for everybody. It's dependent on the size of the meter that comes to your property. It's included in that fixed fee. From 31 to 60 cubic meters, we currently charge $2.42 per cubic meter. And that $60 and greater is when the rate jumps up. And so having an analysis and looking at the properties with some of the data and rationale that I provided on the previous slide, I established this new rate structure where the 0 to 30 cubic meters will come with that fixed fee. Of course, it looks quite different now. There are 235 accounts using between 0 and 30 cubic meters. There are 337 accounts using up to 75 cubic meters. So I've increased the 60 cubic meters to 75, and the rate has come down to $2.10. So the water up to 75 cubic meters is a little bit cheaper for the residential class, but we're still maintaining the equity, and the residential class continues to pay what they're consuming overall in the system. For over 75 cubic meters, we've kept the rate at $3.56. In the last rate review, we wanted to make sure there was a big difference between what the average residential property was consuming and still target that high consumption in the residential class. So that's been maintained and is intact in this rate structure. If I did not change that, change the value of that middle tier and broaden that tier, the residential class would be paying for more than what the consumption levels would be based on 2023 data. So this is a newly proposed rate structure, variable charges for residential. Now I'm going to move on to commercial, which was much more complicated. The ranges in the commercial class were developed based on impact of usage when supply was low. That was a main driver, main consideration going into this rate structure, which we did present to council coming out of the summer of 2023 in that November 20th report. There were a number of projects that took place. There were a number of discussions that took place. The new water conservation measures speak to some of the challenges we experienced in 2023, but there isn't any one measure that we can put in place that is going to reduce our risk to the lowest level possible, or to address all the concerns that we had coming out of last year. Utility rates is one component of this, and so we really looked at that through that lens in having a look at the rate structure for the for all of our classes. So coming up with tiers that would try to encourage resource conservation during those driest months of the year. Also acknowledging that water during those times of the year needs to cost more because the demand is higher and the supply is low, which is, I think, very, very straightforward economics when we're having a look at the cost of this service. That's when the utility is going to cost more. And so I'll go into what the numbers look like on the next slide. We had to ensure that the revenue requirements were not exceeded. So what we charge per cubic meter of water isn't going to be the same as the residential class. When the amount of consumption, when we see the amount of consumption going through the commercial class, we can't effectively charge the same amount per cubic meter in the commercial class. It's the rationale and that resource conservation and all those objectives that come behind setting that rate that truly matters. So visually, someone may see, well, my 75 cubic meters of water, 75 to 100 costs more, and I live in a residential home, but for a business, that per cubic meter charge is lower. We can't effectively have the same charge in both of the classes, but we can achieve the same objectives and set the same rationale when we're establishing the rate structure. So before I show the variable charges for commercial, I just wanted to emphasize that point. So revenue requirements could not be exceeded, and that largely determines what we can set those rates at. The majority of consumption does occur in this class, as I've mentioned, and seasonality has been removed, and so there are higher consumption rates all year long to spread out the collection of revenue, so that adds revenue stability to the municipality. We will be collecting a bit more evenly throughout the year, understanding consumption is lower in those off seasons, but with having higher operational budgets, higher capital budgets, cash flow has become increasingly important. So removing seasonality gives us the ability to collect more evenly throughout the year. So we've presented the water master plan. We've talked a lot through water conservation last summer about the top 10 users of the system, and I did have a look at sort of hone in on the top 10 users of the system through my process as well. The range of consumption, and just looking at Q3 of 2023, goes from 2,289 cubic meters up to 7,828 cubic meters. So that ranges in use from 7 hotels, 1 processing, and 2 commercial campgrounds in those 10 top users, focusing on Q3 of 2023. So I'm using that data when I provide this information. So when you have a look at those consumption levels and the different types of uses, you can see that those top 10 users of the system, out of 166 commercial accounts, you can see that it's quite a volatile class in terms of consumption levels and actual billing amount. So when we're playing with the rates, it can be quite sensitive when you change even 10 cents, or you establish a tier, or you add seasonality. So by removing seasonality, it allowed us to look at this a little bit more evenly and remove that fluctuation so much, or the response to fluctuation in the rates when I was playing with the rates. So in Q3 of 2023, the bills ranged from $5,000 to $17,000 for water alone. So just looking at the water utility for a moment. And I just provide a few of these numbers as a way to show the differences within this commercial and other class. Even though the commercial and other class has multiple types of users, we create those accounts in our system, or differentiate the accounts in our system based on the type of use, so we can ensure we're maintaining equity even within that commercial and other class. So the diagram I show in a moment will show that we've maintained that equity across the board. So the next 40 users of the system, if I were to look at the top 50, range in consumption from 342 to 1,800 cubic meters. So we start to drop quite a bit lower after the top 10 users of the system. The next 40 range from 342 up to 1,800. So there's a total of 166 commercial accounts, and 116 of those accounts are over 342 cubic meters. The rest are lower. Okay, so the current commercial rates are on the left-hand side again. So from October to March, it's $1.65 per cubic meter of water. And so those are the periods of time where supply is high and the demand is typically lower. And from April to September, when demand is high, their rate is $2.28. So the tiered structure that we've set up captures the highest consumption quarter and has a look at those top 10 users of the system. 0 to 2,000 cubic meters would effectively be charged at $2.10, which is, somewhere in the middle, or somewhere between $1.65 and $2.28, and spread out and collected over the year. And 156 accounts are sitting within that range. And when it's over 2,000 cubic meters, the rate is now $3 per cubic meter. And that's for the top 10 users of the system that I mentioned a moment ago. And with the vast difference in consumption between the 156 users and the 10 users, making any changes, even 5 cents or adding another tier, could over collect in revenue. We tried to add a middle tier, and it over collected in revenue and required us to go back to the residential class, and we weren't able to achieve equity by adding a third tier. We had 3 different sets of tiers, but we couldn't achieve equity in the residential class. So this is what the proposed rate structure is using, and I'm going to provide some samples. No, I'm going to go over sewer fees first, and then I'm going to provide some calculations. So very similar to how I went through the water, I'm going to go through sewer. It's not going to be as lengthy because these rates are 1.45 times the water rate. So the rationale and the tethering of the rates, that all in the objectives, they all remain the same. So I'm not going to go through them in such great detail.
Now, can we just pause for a moment? Did you have a question, Councillor Sawyer, on the?
Yeah, so just a question for clarification to the chair. I'm just confused. I don't know if I understood something properly. So one of the first slides you showed us was projected revenue for 2024 and 25. And we were over collecting and then talking about putting the extra into using it for incentives the previous year or the following year. But now we're talking about not being able to collect over the fees. So can you remind me of what we were talking about there and why one is okay and the other one's not?
Okay, through the chair, I'm not sure, maybe I missed about the second piece. I don't believe I said that we're under collecting. I'm not sure I understand the question, my apologies.
Do you understand?
You were talking about not being able to collect above required revenues, I believe.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
So if the projected revenues that we are collecting are conservative. And so what we've adopted in the financial plan and what we will be where we're proposing our expenditures to be include a contribution from surplus. The contribution from surplus drops if we do over collect in revenues. And so I can't allocate those funds to water conservation efforts until I come back to council and say, okay, this is where we landed in terms of 2024 revenue collection or 2023, what year are we in? 2024 revenue collection, and then council would allocate those budgets. So there is no guarantee that we will land with those revenue projections because we are using such conservative data. So yes, I am saying one of two things, or I'm saying two different things, but when we are establishing rates for such a large service with such large revenue requirements, it's hard to get to the dollar amount or to the penny. It's rarely possible. So we have a bit lower on the sewer side, a little bit higher on the water side. I'm imagining that will probably balance out and be a little bit even. So with the incentive program on the horizon, that's likely where those funds would go to if there is a scenario where we do over collect. So we do have years where we collect more revenue than we project, and we have years where we collect less revenue than we project. Neither is good, and neither is something that the province will accept in the financial plan. So if we do over collect, we have to be prudent with those funds and transparent and come back to council and adopt a certain specified purpose for those funds in the financial plan.
Okay, cool. Thank you. That clears it up.
Okay, thank you.
Ready to move on then? Okay, continue.
Okay. So this fee structure on the left-hand side is our current rate structure, and that's 90% of what the current water structure is. And then on the right-hand side, those are 1.45 times the amount of the fixed fees being proposed in the water side. So those are an exact calculation, 1.45 times what I showed in the previous slide. So I'm not gonna go through them in detail. We can come back to these if you like. For the commercial and other class, again, on the left-hand side, the commercial and other fixed fee was $45.76, and now it's being proposed to attach to size of the water service, and it's 1.45 times the charge in the water fund. The fee structure on the left-hand side is what we currently have, which is 90% of what I presented previously. And on the right-hand side, those would be 1.45 times the water charge that I am proposing today. So from 31 to 75, that goes up to $3.05. And over 75 cubic meters, it goes to $5.16, which is quite a big difference in that class. For the variable charge for commercial and other, there's no variable charge for the fire flow meters. It's a fixed charge only, and there's no consumption charges if consumption were to go through that meter in the case of an event. So these are on the left-hand side, those are the seasonality rates that we currently have. And so we've removed seasonality from the rates, and the proposed structure is on the other side, and that's 1.45 times the water rates in the commercial class. So 0 to 2,000 is $3.05, and then over 2,000 is $4.35. And I just want to go back to my comments that I made earlier that it is impossible for us to get to the exact same cubic meter cost for water and sewer in the residential and the commercial class. Given the volume of consumption in this class and the number of utility accounts in the residential class. So this is the equity table that I referenced a few times, and this is showing water. This is showing water only. We have one for sewer that looks more or less the same because the charge is tethered to the water rate. So for brevity, as brief as I can be, I've provided it for the water fund. So you may not be able to see those percentages on the screen. I don't know if I can even see them on my paper, but the H stands for hotel, and the C stands for campground. And the R is the residential class plus SI, which is strata individual. So R and SI go together and create that equity. There's a difference of about a percentage, similar to the difference that we're seeing in the hotel consumption and revenue collection. So the blue bar is the projected revenue contribution, and the lighter blue is the projected revenue contribution, and the darker one is the water consumption amount. And so for hotel, it's 35.97% of water consumed and 34.14% of projected revenue contribution. So when I say equity is being maintained, it's not to the percentage or the dollar amount. It's very difficult to get to that point when you're dealing with developing a rate structure for many millions of dollars. However, you can see that equity has largely been maintained across all the uses in the class. The one that you're not going to see equity in is that fire flow class, because it's a fixed charge only, and it just makes up some of the difference that you're seeing, say, in campgrounds, where the projected revenue contribution is lower than the actual water consumed, and some of the other smaller areas are doing the same thing. The fire flow class makes up that difference in the commercial and other class. So this is just a visual of how equity has been maintained in this rate structure, which I believe is an incredibly important objective, and one that's been a strong objective since probably the first sort of big overhaul we did back in 2011. Okay, so now I'm going to provide some examples of what the bills are gonna look like and what the differences are in the utility bills. And so I'm gonna start with a residential class. And I'm using Q3 again, because that's where the highest consumption is in all classes. And it was a good data to use for 2023 as well. So the first three lines, I know this is a lot to look at, so let's just look at the first three lines where it says 50 cubic meters. If you recall, the fixed fee charge is different now depending on the meter size. So I wanted to use that $50, which is the average in Q3 consumption, to show what the difference in a utility bill will look like on the water side. Then we go to sewer, and of course, we're expecting an increase in change there. So for those smaller meters, the fixed and variable charge in the first two columns are what we currently charge. And the new fixed proposed fee, it remains the same for this size of meter, 5/8 or 3/4 inch. The proposed variable fee drops slightly because we've made the water slightly cheaper by expanding that middle tier and dropping the fee slightly from the 31 to 75 cubic meters. So the difference is a reduction of $6.40 in that quarter. And of course, we charge quarterly, so that's expanded throughout the year. Consumption is more consistent at this level, so you can just take that and divide it by 4. So there's about a $25 reduction on the water side by making that change to that middle tier. I provide an example of 30 cubic meters because we have many accounts that only use 30 cubic meters and there'll be no change there. And then I chose the 75 cubic meter mark and 150 cubic meter mark. And we do have properties that do consume that amount in Q3 and sometimes Q2. So I chose those two amounts somewhat strategically. So you can see that at 75 cubic meters, when the meter size is still 5/8 or 3/4, there is a drop in the overall charge because that 31 to 75 cubic meters of water is slightly cheaper now. If that meter size were to be larger, that difference, if there likely would be a reduction in that bill because that meter size would jump up to $74 in a fixed fee, and it would be about even. So in this fee structure, the fixed fee component, it impacts the charges this year versus or last year versus this year for sure. And you'll see that on the commercial side as well. There's quite a big difference. So at 150 cubic meters with a 1-inch meter, we're looking at an increase of $1.69. And so you can see that overall increase is not as high. We are making that middle tier cheaper in order to maintain that equity. Having a look, and I have the benefit of working here in a small community of consumption and knowing sort of what happens on properties and whether there's a short-term rental or whether there is a single family home with a suite. I could see that there were some properties that were disadvantaged between the 60 and 75 cubic meter consumption level when there was no short-term rental on the property. And so expanding out that to 75 cubic meters meant that we weren't sort of, impacting those properties that were providing that long-term housing versus having that commercial component on the property. So that was one consideration in looking at the rates. Yes.
Through the chair, I just want to make a comment that just my calculation, the vast majority of residential properties are going to be paying slightly less for their water with the proposed rates. And I did notice the only one up there that was significantly higher, 1.5 inch at 97. There's only one of those. I just had my note here. So I just wanted to say that, clarify that, because those numbers get lost, but that's great. Thanks.
Okay, and then for the sewer bills, and I know that we've all been anticipating this utility rate increase for a number of years, about 7 years. And it's happening now, and I know that this is a fairly significant change for everybody in the community. So I just wanted to emphasize that I don't come forward lightly today and propose new utility rates. This has been a long time in the making, a long time coming, and something we've talked about over many financial planning cycles. So on the similar consumption levels on the sewer side at the 50 cubic meter mark, just focusing on the top three lines, you can see that a 5/8 inch meter, 3/4 inch meter, that fixed fee increases by 1.45 times as previously shown, and then the variable charges are higher as well. So there's a difference of $41.61 for a quarter. So that's about $160 a year for an average residential home. That's using the average consumption in Q3 of last year. The average consumption overall for the entire year was 44 cubic meters, so that would be slightly lower than that. But I used 50 just to go on the high side of what the impact would be. And then, of course, you see more of a change the larger the servicing is. So that fixed fee makes the assumption that with a larger meter, you're going to see a higher consumption level there. That fixed, and it's more costly to maintain. So that fixed fee is now costing more and bringing more stability to the rate structure. I use 30 cubic meters again, so we can see that even though 30 cubic meters comes with the fixed fee, there's still a variable charge. And so there's an addition of about $24.47. So that's about $100 per year. And at 75 cubic meters, using just a standard meter size, I guess we'll call it, there's a $64.51 fixed charge, and the variable charge increases. So it's about, or close to $50 for a quarter, about $200 per year. And then we have the 1 inch meter where that fixed fee is going to be higher. And assuming there's significant consumption on that property, those consumption charges are going to be higher, and it's adding about $238 to that quarter. And when we start to get to this consumption level, we're not seeing that every quarter. So that's going to be for during the quarters, likely Q2 and Q3, where demand is high and supply can be compromised during those times of year. So that's when those fees would be higher. Okay, and then on the commercial side, I went in and took the top 10 consumers, and I did that because we set the tier at 2,000 cubic meters per quarter, and Q2 and Q3 is when we see those consumption levels go that high. So we can't do the same thing we did in the residential class where we take that number and multiply it by 4, because the consumption levels are only, are typically high in Q2 and Q3. So while these numbers are much larger than the residential class and can probably feel a little bit, surprising or alarming, we can't take that number and multiply it by 4 because consumption varies significantly. So the top 10 consumers, like I said, range from 2,289 up to 7,828. The current fixed and variable fee are provided in the next 2 columns. The proposed fixed fee is based on the new or the proposed rate structure, and you can see where there's a larger service, the fixed fee is going to be higher, and that's where most of the difference is coming from on the water side, is that change in that fixed fee component, adding more stability to our rate structure, our revenue collection. So if you look the 4th one down where the consumption is 3,082, the fixed fee, that's a 6-inch meter on that property. The fixed fee is $1,695 per quarter, where it was previously $50.85. I want to emphasize that fixed fee was arbitrarily set to introduce a fixed fee component to our rate structure the last time we underwent a review. This time we have a strong rationale for developing those fixed fees, and it's going to add about 5% more to our overall fixed fee collection in any given year, and that adds a great deal of stability to our rate structure and revenue collection. So by changing that fixed fee as well as the variable component, that property is gonna pay approximately $2,000 more in Q3 than they did last year. And I don't want to just, go ignore the highest consumer on the system. I don't think we can. I want to highlight that this is going to be a significant change for the highest consumers of the system. At 7,828 cubic meters, I'm using Q3 consumption at a time of year where I think it's all still very fresh in our minds, where supply was, significantly compromised, very dry time of the year across the province, country. And that is a time where demand was still high. And that's the time of year where water is going to be costing more. Until such time as we have a system that can tolerate this level of consumption. So at 7,828 cubic meters, the current fixed fee is $50.85. That property does not have a 6-inch meter. It has a smaller meter. And so that fixed fee is $271. The district does not decide on the meter size. That's established at the time of development. So as we sort of move through time, as rules or regulations change or development occurs on a particular property, service sizes may require a change, and we don't necessarily make that determination. And then at that time, when the meter size changes, effectively the demand's going to change on that property, and then the fixed fee will change. For now, that property is sitting at 271 cubic meter or fixed fee per quarter, and the variable charge currently is 17,829. It's going up to 21,684. So that's $4,075. You can't take that again and multiply it by 4 because the consumption varies from quarter to quarter on these properties. So that's the change on the water side. And I think that you know where I'm going, because on the sewer side of the system, we have been anticipating this change for a number of years, 7 years to be exact in budget cycles, in anticipating the change and the additional cost to the wastewater system. We now have a wastewater system that costs more than our water system. Tethering it to water consumption is the best practice approach, and will continue to do so. So that translates into these numbers. And I'll go through the fourth one down again. So that property consuming 3,082 cubic meters in Q3 had a fixed fee of $45.76 with consumption charges of $6,318. That fixed fee is going up to $2,458. There's a 6-inch meter on the property. It's in line and applicable for the type of servicing that's required for that property. And the variable charges are increasing to $10,798. So there's a $6,891 effective change in Q3 expected. And so on the previous slide, on the water slide, that property was going up about $2,000. So that's a change of $8,800 overall in that one. Again, because consumption is not even, we can't just project that out for the entire year. And I will go to the property at the end where the consumption is the highest at 7,828. That fixed fee is going from $45 up to $393, given the size of meter, and the variable consumption charges are more or less doubling. So at $16,046 previously, they're going up to $31,442. And so that's a difference of $15,743, plus the water difference on the other side, which is making that close to about $20,000 for that one quarter. So I analyzed quite closely the top 50 users of both the residential and the commercial class, as well as all of the accounts. But here I'm providing the the first 10 users of those top 50, so sort of the bottom side of the top 50. And the range in consumption goes from 342 up to 446. And so the rest of those accounts are using less than 342 cubic meters in the commercial class. So quite a significant range within that class, as I've mentioned. So I'll maybe just go over the top one and the bottom one. We can see that at 342 cubic meters, this sewer charge is going up $688. That's one of the larger meter sizes, and so that fixed fee is going from $45 up to $393. And I'll choose one maybe halfway down where the consumption is about $390. The fixed fee, because the meter size is lower, is $123. The overall change is $465. And on the bottom one at 446 cubic meters, the fixed fee is higher at $393 because it's a larger meter size, and the difference there is $791. So those are the calculations that I prepared for council today. I will finish up here and then we can get into questions if you have some. We want to remind that the wastewater treatment plant is commissioning in this year and is nearing completion. And that is why we're coming forward with this rate review. And I think that it hasn't been a surprise or a secret to everybody because it's been in the financial plan since about 2017. Originally, again, we estimated that it would be a 97% increase to operating expenses, and we were able to bring that down to 87%. We know we need to take a close look at it after operations are sort of underway and have completed, and we may need to come back and do some more tweaking, but that will be at a later date. The 2024 to 2028 financial plan includes that 87% increase that was adopted earlier this year, with a full increase occurring in 2024. Our current rate structure, when we were doing our cash flow projections and budget projections, include a 4% increase per year. That's going to be closely monitored as well, but we just cannot effectively have a rate structure that doesn't include an annual increase in it, given the rate of increases of materials and supplies. That 4% is embedded in council's financial plan and has been included in this rate review. So our goal looking forward, because this was such an extensive review, and we typically, wouldn't go through this type of review every year, likely every 5 years. And definitely when something significant changes with the system, we would go through this type of review, but we need to revisit our objectives annually. We need to make sure we're meeting our revenue targets, make sure that we are maintaining that equity within the class. If we got something wrong, the benefit is we can amend the bylaws and we can fix it. We want to make sure we're continuing transparency. I was a big proponent to talking about utility rates very openly, having open houses and hearing from the community back in 2011 when we realized there was a significant inequity in the way we were charging, and we have fixed that. I think it's important to continue to have meetings like this today and continue to come back to council many times before proposing a rate structure and introducing bylaws. And we need to ensure that these rate structures and our budgets that we're setting and our targets are in alignment with the service levels that council would like us to offer to the community. And from an asset management perspective, we continue to work very closely on that and determining more clearly our long-term operational and our capital needs. Capital needs are continuing to come through the capital and infrastructure levy, but not all of our repairs and maintenance and renewal costs are capital in nature. As we work through asset management, we're realizing that our operational budgets in some areas are constrained, or maybe we have too much in other areas. And so we're tidying that up. And we're going to come back to council with more informed budgets from year to year with asset management practices attached to those budget requests. So I do have a recommendation in the package tonight, and that's that staff be authorized to introduce amendments to District of Tofino Water Utility Bylaw number 1213/2015 and the Sewer Utility Bylaw number 1214/2015. based on the rate structure presented this evening. We do have a planned special council meeting on June 19th, where I would have a written report for council proposing or introducing amendments to these two bylaws based on the proposed rate structure this evening and any feedback I receive from council. We are legislatively required to provide a written rationale to the community on how we've established the rates, the set of objectives that we've set out, and why we require this change, and that will be in the report on June 19th, with proposed adoption on June 20th. Happy to answer any questions.
Outside of the recommendation, are you looking for any particular feedback from council members?
Okay.
This committee, or just a general reaction?
Reactions are always good. I feel very confident with the rate structure that I presented tonight. So confident that I did not provide scenarios for council to consider. I feel like the objectives were evaluated very, very well by staff, and I did not work on this in isolation. I want to give full credit to the infrastructure and asset management team that we have not had before to help inform this process. So I feel like this is where we need to go with utility rates. So, but happy to answer and take any questions of clarity. And if there is feedback, I will take that today and bring it back on June 19th.
What is Waterworth? Is that a program for working through this?
Yeah, it's a software and it's a consulting company. They used to be called Econics, and they worked with us very closely on our 2011 review that we did, 2010, 2011. And that's just what they do. They work with municipalities in Canada and into the US. They establish best practices. They help inform the process by sharing with us what other municipalities are doing. So I couldn't have developed this rate structure without the tools that they've provided.
Fair deal of complexity to attach numbers to.
Yes.
Any comments, questions from committee members, council members?
I think probably everybody's gonna want maybe a chance.
Okay.
I mean, wherever you want to start on either end.
You look like you're raring.
Well, I was gonna say I have 17 pages, but the number anyway.
You'd get called.
I know I would get called out. So now I just want to start by saying, I think we need to start right from scratch, and you should begin this whole process just. No, I first just want to thank you for all the tremendous, I know how much work this is and the amount of work that goes in. And I think just from those general comments, I really appreciate having those objectives clearly articulated. And you mentioned, I lost track of the number of times, stability and equity as those important objectives, and having this rate structured through those objectives, I think is critical. And I appreciate that, because I would agree 100% those are the objectives that I found most applicable to this rate review. So kudos there. You mentioned it many, many times. So there's absolute clarity about where you were going on that. The other part is the proposed structural changes in terms of consumption based and removing that seasonality. I think once again, I'm sure was informed by a number of conversations, critical. And I think that's going to help with the public understanding of that proposed structure change. So I don't have any specific questions. I had a number of little small points for just for my own personal interest, but I think Dan also mentioned clearly the vast majority of our users from the residential component are not going to be seeing significant changes from those, and those of us that do fall within that 30 cubic meter range are going to be smiling quite a bit. So there is an incentive built in within there, I think, again, and on the commercial equity end of things, I think it's been clearly articulated. Consumption based is those that use the system. I think the public in general will understand those that have the highest demands on those systems should contribute to those. And I think that's been clearly articulated in these utility rates. So thank you. And those are the comments.
We'll just move down the table.
All right.
I won't forget about you, Councillor McMaster. We'll leave you to the end.
Want to concur with Councillor Steer. I think it was an excellent in-depth review. I very much appreciated the equity focus, and you know, the phrase that comes to mind is pay what things are worth. And I think this is a great example of really looking at rates and use and residential versus commercial, and actually bringing that closer into getting people to pay what things are worth for what they use. So I really very much appreciate this report. I appreciate the results. What more can I say? You know, I do want to say, like, not too many years ago, from what I knew of how the water was being run in rates, and I just got to say, I've just seen in every facet of this organization a move towards professionalism. Not that not everybody's a professional already, but I just very much appreciate this approach, and I appreciate all the work the staff have done. It's just great work. So that's what I want to say.
Councillor Sloman, did you have any?
I don't really have much more to add besides that the amount of detail that went into that was quite profound. I think yeah, as everyone else has said, I think the equity is really important, and that's pretty much it.
Councillor Sawyer?
Yeah, I just want to thank you for answering my questions, and I'm sure I'll have more, but none right now.
And Councillor McMaster?
Yeah, it looks like a good job. I can't argue with the maths because we haven't seen the maths, but I like the fact that we're achieving the objectives. I'm just wondering whether it would be possible when we start issuing water rates for a year at least, to show the new charge versus the old charge, so people can see how much they're either saving or paying extra. Because I think that would be good for people for a year at least. And I don't know whether we can modify our water bills to accommodate that.
Through the chair to Councillor McMaster, I will look into that. I don't know if our software has that capability, so it may be a manual task, but we can, if it is a manual task, perhaps it's something we could do for the first quarter, maybe the second quarter, depending on how onerous it is, but I'll get back to you on that.
Yeah, I just think that sort of get through to people, especially the people that are actually paying less. It would get through to them a lot more than having an open house or listening to you or whatever.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I did have a question. Is it okay?
It certainly is okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Through the chair, it relates to what Councillor McMaster was just talking about. It was, and I had it at the top of the page, communications around this. Is there a communications plan for these rate changes? I know as part of the information, how we're going to roll this out. Once adopted, I will roll that out.
Through the chair to Councillor Steer, thanks for that question. Anytime there is a utility rate change, we have a newsletter that goes with the billings. If this is adopted on June 25th, the utility bills go out in July. It's my intention to send something with those bills so that there's a notification of what is to come and what will happen. We also have the opportunity to send a more of a comprehensive, almost like a tax guide style, with the first utility bill, so we can talk more in depth about why the change needed to occur, a little bit more about the both of the utility fund budgets. And then if we're unable to do what Councillor McMaster has asked for, we could provide some more general information about how much the average residential bill will change, maybe group together some of the commercial uses and how much those will change in terms of percentages, and provide that type of information in that newsletter.
Question for clarity through the chair. Just this is going to be, if the council adopts this, this is going to be implemented in Q3 of 2024. Sorry, is that right?
Yeah.
So follow up to that, it would be, great to note to those top 10 users that now would be the time to, have another look at reduction and conservation measures.
So our infrastructure team, I understand it, are working quite closely with the those users of the system. I believe recently, there was a reach out to those customers. I don't know if there's any comments that staff want to make on that.
It's, I mean, through the chair, I mean, it's
Okay.
more, I think this year we're collaboration with corporate services, I think.
Okay.
Mr. McCall's department's
Yeah, great.
taking great charge on it.
Okay, yeah, thank you for the question. Yeah, we reached out last week to all 14 of the top major users. Just to inform them of the water conservation master plan and to reach out for any questions. So we're in direct contact with all those folks.
And this work that staff are doing is in follow-up to what we did last year where staff went around site to site and talked with the various properties about water conservation and while we were experiencing some of those challenges last year. And this year we've taken a more proactive approach, which includes establishing new utility rates with our conservation measures, and it's been working quite well.
Yeah, I think everything's been said. I reiterate that the objectives are sound. I think we're moving on good principles. I did have a question about how do we determine the required revenues when we don't know consumption? It's kind of like, it's a projection, I guess. But.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So that work is done at all levels of staffing, and so it's about to begin now for the next 5 years. So we use information from every employee in the District of Tofino, what they do on a daily basis, and the work that they do help inform our financial plans, from operational requirements, vehicle requirements. We obtain information at every department and every division, and then that builds the financial plan. So in the two utilities, the infrastructure division is working closely with those staff to determine what the requirements are, operational requirements are. Development of the new wastewater treatment plant. We worked with the engineering team to figure out what the operational requirements would be, what the staffing levels will be. So it's those line by line budgets that we develop first to determines our total expenses, and then that has to match our revenue requirement for the year. And then we work backwards and establish those utility rates. Same as when we establish the property tax rates.
Okay. It looks like we fell pretty close to on target for, we projected our operation costs for the treatment plant to be. So that's good. No big surprises there.
Yeah, we purposefully chose 2023 consumption because it was a conservative year. When we started the year, we didn't meet consumption levels. Our consumption levels were lower than in previous years. So we're in another conservative year, and we are working closely with Tourism Tofino and the Chamber. We continue to try to determine what's actually happening with visitation, because that largely drives what the consumption levels will be. And if we see another year like we do this year, we won't necessarily meet those targets, but we do have surplus funds to help balance out any risk that we might encounter if there were to be another fire or we run into issues with water.
Okay, great. There's nothing else. I think we'll move to the recommendation. Would somebody like to move that, or would you like me to move it from the chair?
If you've got it written, right?
I do have it perfect here right in front of me. So I will move from the chair the recommendation that staff be authorized to introduce amendments to the District of Tofino Water Utility Bylaw number 1213 2015, and sewer utility bylaw number 1214, 2015, based on the rate structure presented at the June 3rd, 2024 Committee of the Whole meeting. Second, any discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion is carried. Okay, we have a second presentation, item 8.2, and this is a wastewater treatment plant update. Mr. Kirkland.
Good evening, Chair, Mayor and Council. I'll be presenting a relatively brief update on the wastewater treatment plant project. As we are continually nearing completion, the latter end of this year. Thanks, Mr. Turtle. Great. So yeah, a quick overview of what I'll present today. So project progress update, lots of photos, budget schedule update, and go over a list of project completion milestones that we're actively working towards, and have some time for any questions or comments or feedback. So progress updates. So at the wastewater treatment plant facility itself, we're somewhere around 95% complete. Just implementing some minor systems and some changes, and working on, making the area look more like a facility than a construction site at this time. All major equipment startups are now complete. So I've had vendors come in from all over the place, primarily North America, fly in to do vendor startup. Following that, the initial vendor training on each applicable process system has been completed for district staff. Right now, as you see around town, there's been some movement with generators and odor control units and electrical controls kiosks. So we're undergoing all the finishing works on the conveyance, the 4 conveyance lift stations around town. The contractor is getting ahead on working on deficiencies at the facility, which will follow any deficiencies that are ongoing on the conveyance works as well. And we're working closely with the Ministry of Environment to have a final effluent or operating permit in place by the time we're ready for commissioning. So we've even got next week, we actually have a compliance officer and the statutory decision maker coming out for a site tour with staff and the engineering team. And then the fun stuff. So yeah, there's kind of a complete look at what the facility looks like. You'll notice all the tanks are full of water. So we're actually cycling water throughout the facility. With next week, conveniently with the MOE coming, we are doing our 3-day recirculation test, which is the first step in proving out the facility before liquid waste is introduced to undergo treatment. So big milestone there. Over the next coming months, if we flew a drone up there again, you're going to see a lot less trailers on the one side of the area, and we'll be bringing up the ring road area to its final grade to make that look a lot more complete. Inside, so I just thought I'd share a photo since we're coming to the final stages of the project. This is also the final form of treatment at the actual facility. So these are on the left are the UV reactors. So after the treated effluent exits the top of the clarifier as it flows through there, and just the control panel on the right-hand side, which kind of controls all the actions that the UV reactors take. And that was also training that we did on the staff. So this is the staff undergoing the UV reactor training a couple weeks ago. Just kind of photo showing the dynamic of how the staff training, we're sitting around and then everybody's out in the field with the vendors kind of going over the equipment. Up here, just showing how we are cycling water through. So this is our flow splitter box in the headworks building, which distributes the flow through the two different treatment trains. So yeah, showing some water cycling through there. You can see there's a little piece of wood on the bottom left there. So there's deficiencies that come on underway. We are missing a weir plate there, which is being fabricated right now, will be installed in the next month or two. This inside the electrical room, showing some of the finishes. So in several areas, we've installed an epoxy coated flooring just to help increase service life of the flooring and making it easier for maintenance. This room, not necessarily a messy process room, but in the room adjacent to it, the large process gallery, there may be spills from time to time, and having a chemical treatment to the concrete floor will just ensures more robustness and a longer service life to the facility, or that part of the facility. This photo from last week, this is over at the Centennial Park pump station. So you see the generator and the electrical and controls kiosk has been installed. You see the same thing just outside here, which I'll show in another photo. Right here over at Main Street, just in front of the radio station and behind the gravel parking lot here, you've got the electrical and controls kiosk installed and the generator installed. And just in the middle, we'll have an odor control unit that will be installed there as well. So some finishing touches ongoing. And yeah, so that's kind of the overall update based on talking about photos, which is kind of nice to have a look at. Getting into budget and schedule. So as Ms. Atiano was indicating, we are on track for September to be fully operational. But to get fully operational, there's a series of tie-ins that we do need to complete. So over the course of the month of August 2024, we will be undertaking that. So there will be sewage introduced to the plant slowly, but we're projecting end of September by the time that we're actually treating it to what capacity that it's been designed to be treated for. So it's a gradual biological kind of growth. Contractor completion is going to be later in 2024, sometime October, November right now. Even once liquid waste is being treated, there are going to be some additional works that are still ongoing, and the contractor kind of cleaning up deficiencies and going through the demobilization stages of the project. And then the project does remain on budget at the later times, and the operational budget's finalized as we all just spent time chatting about there. And then as we move forward, we'll be looking at ways to optimize that as we go through the first year of a fully functional facility in 2025. And I'll just highlight some project closeout milestones. So as I stated before, staff are training ongoing on all the wastewater treatment plant systems, which will blend into overall training, which the engineering firm WSP will help conduct and kind of walk staff through an overall functioning plant and how to operate it. Bringing all the different various vendor trainings together into one. To help that, we've also contracted a chief operator and put them in place to help mentor and coach our district staff. And they'll be sticking around with us for the rest of this year and into part of next year. Next week, we have our 3-day recirculation test to prove out different pieces of equipment. We have SCADA programming ongoing, so the plant can be run remotely, and we'll have all alarms tracked and monitored and sent to an on-call phone in the off hours. We're finalizing the tie-in plan, which will be enacted over the month of August 2024. Final finishes on the conveyance are being installed, and to help continually facilitate the closeout of the project, we have bi-weekly startup testing and commissioning meetings. And We're also working with the contractor to, for them to provide us with a very detailed inventory list of all the different assets that are part and parcel with the facility. So we have a clean handover as we go into the tangible capital asset process. And then moving into our new preventative maintenance system that we've been developing with the district's asset management program. So that's the update I have today. I think we are planning some sort of a function as we get a little closer to the end of the project, which may or may not involve large scissors. So I think there'll be some more details shared about that in the short term here. So that's what I've got today. Just haven't got up here to present an update in a while, so we thought it was a great time to do so.
Okay. Is there like an official point where the old system converts to the new treatment plant, or is it gradual that the old system is phased out and the new treatment plant is? How does that work? The switch over, presumably we're still on the old system.
Yeah, we are on the old system. This would take a whiteboard to kind of draw out, but I'll try to stay relatively high level to.
I thought it was a simple question.
Yeah, to answer the question. The tie-ins, it's essentially broken out into 7 key areas throughout town. The 4 main areas is, switching in at Warren Way at the foot of Industrial Way, where we'll break out the pipe and gas and go will then flow by gravity to Warren Way. At Main Street, there's a couple big tie-ins at Main Street. There's another tie-in down at the bottom of the first street at what we call a wharf pump station, and another tie-in at Centennial Park pump station. So it's broken out into several different phases, 7. So I guess I could say we're at 1/7 treating our sewer for a certain point, and then another 7th and another 7th and another 7th, and then when everything has been tied in and there's presumably no issues at all, which we hope to, and we plan lots of contingency plans in the event that we do go into challenges, then we can officially say we are no longer discharging raw sewage into the Pacific Ocean.
They were all waiting for.
Yeah.
Any other questions, comments? Tom, leave some things for the rest of us.
Should start at the other end. Thank you through the chair. Thank you, Simon. I mean, this is of course super exciting. This has been, for how long now? Since beginning of council, and you liquid waste management plans, how many years in the making there? It's super exciting, man. I can't contain myself on that, but a couple of questions after I go over the excitement. Staffing levels. So in terms of the operations of the plant, where are we at in terms of I know there's some special skills that are needed, and that there has been, and you'll have to remind me because I know it probably was in the budget process, and but how are we at with our training and with our staffing ability to operate this fairly complex plant?
Yeah, through the chairman, that's a great question. To start from a high level, we are going to be looking for another staff member to join up with the team next year. Part of that is part of contracting out a chief operator, which the contracted chief operator we have is he actually sits on the OCP board of directors as well. We're going to be working with them to kind of find what that sweet spot is. We're also kind of revamping internally how the framework of our utility operator teams are right now as well, so that there is kind of a uniform training as they go through the environmental operator certification program. So everyone does get kind of like cycles throughout the different district infrastructure facilities. So at this time, we believe, and working with other professionals in the industry, that we do have a good baseline to start off in 2025, which, combining it with having contracted chief operators, that we have somewhere that we can start, and then as the plant kind of comes to fruition in terms of maturity and kind of, you know, we have our standard operations as we're going through it, that we'll have a better kind of vision on if we do need to increase or if the staffing level that we have going into next year is adequate. So, I mean, it's touch and go as you know, there's greenfield facilities. We're contracting out a lot of the maintenance activities. We have maintenance packages with all of the main equipment providers that we'll put into place, or maintenance contracts, I should say. So trying not to say it in too much of a roundabout way, but you know, we think that where we're gonna be going into 2025 is gonna be a good baseline to start, where the staff are. I mean, it's definitely very stressful for lots of the staff. It's a very large facility and it's something brand new. At the end of the day though, I mean, having a wastewater treatment plant's it's very new for Tofino. It's something that, you know, society in general in Canada has had for many times. And with the automation of much equipment, it's a lot is, you know, keeping up with operations and our regulatory requirements with respect to permitting and keeping up with preventative maintenance. And yeah, I don't know, Mr. Rogers, if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, there's just, if
Yeah.
I could just follow up on through.
We have a baseline that's set. And believe that it's adequate for growth or change as needed as we go through.
And it leads into the next question around, so then operationally, you know, the budget that's been forecasted and that we've been working on. It's an area, of course, that as you've just articulated, we are going to need to go through, you know, 2025 to get down to that granular level to see how things are moving and where we need to make those adjustments. So we'll have a much better idea in terms of moving forward, in terms of those operating costs for this plant. We know that we're going to be seeing an increase in the tax that will be required to fund this plant. So I think you answered the question in there. And then it was, thank you very much for that. You know, the last part about in terms of the asset management and all the great work that's being done on the ground as we speak, and right down to that granular level where you're talking about having that very detailed asset inventory, like right down to pumps and right down to valves, critically important to have that accurate asset management. So that was great to hear. And I look forward to seeing our asset management coming further through. This is a huge addition, obviously, to that. And we expect the complexities of that to be, you know, to be worked through, as they say. So thank you once again.
Okay,
Through the chair, thank you, Councillor Steer.
did you have anything, Mayor Law?
Clarity is a virtue, brevity is divine. I was just gonna say, maybe we could, instead of a ribbon, we could have some cheese.
I know a lot of people, the first one to be the second be mine, the first one that gets flushed, but it's
Bad joke.
Depends what part of town you live in. Through the chair.
Moving down the table, Councillor Sloman, any comments?
Yeah, I really appreciated all your pictures in your presentation after all the numbers we were just. Quite nice.
Very, very important number.
I just wanted to, like, as an avid water person, I just wanted to express my gratitude about the work you've done on getting us to not dumping sewer in the untreated sewer in the ocean.
Thank you, Through the chair, of course.
Councillor Sorry.
Yeah, thank you. I think everything's been said. Just really great to see these reports and photos.
Councillor McMaster, did you?
No, I have nothing to add. I'll refrain from making any off-color comments.
as tempting as it is.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kirkland. And brings us to the end of our agenda. Is there anyone signed up for question period?
Chair Anderson, we don't have anybody currently signed up, but we do have some individuals attending online. So I will make a call if anyone would like to make the question to council. They can do so now. You need to state your name, your address, and the agenda item you're speaking to. So call in once, call in twice, like 3 times. No questions at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Shortall. And I'll move adjournment from the chair and no position. We are adjourned.